Good afternoon, and welcome to another podcast of Security Confidential. Today, we are honored to have James Azar, who is a successful entrepreneur. He's also a nationally recognized speaker and thought leader in the fields of cybersecurity, blockchain, Internet of Things, and fintech. James is a co-founder and host of CyberHub USA, which operates CyberHub Summit and CyberHub Academy, where Azar serves as its chief marketing officer. He also serves as the president of BHNV Ventures, which he oversees a private fund that invests in early stage innovative companies in cybersecurity, blockchain, and fintech. James, welcome to Dark Rhino Security Confidential.
Thank you. That's a very old bio, Kevin. That's a
very
very old bio.
I'm old. I'm so old.
Hey, you know what? This is the beauty of editing. If you got a newer one, send it.
We'll just redo it.
That segment.
That's why I'm never allowed on these things. That's why the CEO is never allowed.
I'm like, wow, that's like a 2017 bio.
It's all good. That's probably the last time I did some. So, James, I really am relegated as the CEO to very seldom participate in these things. One, Manoj tells me that there's not enough light that they can put on my face to get rid of all the imperfections and that are in there. And I said, Manoj, it's nothing more than experience that shows in this face. So you really can't hide all that. The second thing is, James, I loved your bio is on LinkedIn, where that you enjoy several coffees a day, as well as a very good bourbon. So in your honor, I decided to have a 15-year-old bourbon in your favor. So,
well,
James, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's just get the most important question out of the way then. James, what's your favorite bourbon? What do you like to drink? Or scotch?
Or Japanese whiskey.
Or Japanese
whiskey. I can't pronounce
yeah.
my favorite Japanese whiskey, and I can't insult the great people of Japan by trying to say it. I have never gotten it right. I will tell you, I'm a Macallan guy. I'm like a Macallan 15, Macallan 18. Yeah. I don't know, and that's been recent. That wasn't the case before. So, it changes. I think, I had a Four Roses little issue, like little thing. And, like as any Scotch lover, like you've got your go-to stuff, but then, your drink of choice is seasonal.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And
or mood wise.
It depends on your mood. Sometimes you want something rough that burns coming down. And in cyber, we have a lot of those days where you want something that burns when it comes down.
And then you have another one just to kill the pain from the first one.
And then you need another one to kill the pain from the first two. And then another one to make all the pain go away so you can actually go to sleep.
So to our audience, if you haven't decided, we're talking about bourbon right now.
Changed. Right? So from a security perspective, we used to think our address, our building, our floor, our departments, and our divisions, those were our networks and those were our endpoints. COVID upended that. Right. COVID really did change that. One of the very interesting aspects to me was in the immediate aftermath of COVID. If we look back a year ago, right? So a year ago, this time we were all at RSA. It was unbelievable, right? So we were all sanitizing our hands, but we were still hugging and seeing each other and hanging out and eating together. And, people were a bit worried, but not so much. I mean, I remember at the time, one of the people I flew with was wearing a mask the entire flight. And I was like, what are you doing, weirdo?
Yeah,
take that off. Yeah. This isn't a big deal, man. Why are you wearing a mask? But he did. But I think that's one of the things that really changed is the endpoint discussion and then the BYOD conversation. So we think of BYOD, we think of someone bringing their own phone to use work email or a CRM tool like Salesforce or HubSpot within, the environment. Well, now we've introduced two new things into our environments that we have no control over. one, most people that had to stay home rarely got a chance to take home work equipment. So, I mean, I know a lot of companies, we were always virtual, meaning we have a workforce that's spread across the entire world. So,
Right.
you know, everyone's always had, you know, we had a process for, you know, mailing people work devices and getting them secure and sending them how to set up their home networks. And we had a help desk role to help people kind of, you know, in specific roles, not every role, but specific roles, really divvy up their home networks so that we have a little bit more defense in depth in that kind of area, a little bit better cyber hygiene. But in this, you know, but think of all the people that went home and had to use their home computer that didn't have antivirus, that didn't have a VPN, that had to log in and do work.
As a percentage, do you think that's a significant? The VPN part, I would agree with. Antivirus, I would hope most people had.
Most people, you'd be surprised how many homes and how many computers don't have antivirus.
Heck, man, your ISP gives it away for free anymore.
Some ISPs do, others don't. Most people don't know about it because the ISP doesn't advertise it.
Okay, was it like okay?
I mean,
here.
So there were some statistics that were put out. I think it was I think it was Sophos or someone that brought it out that said that on the BYOD devices that were home in the initial stages of the pandemic, 70% of them didn't have any EDR or AV on them. These were personal devices, not company devices. Personal devices.
Yeah.
See, we think like cyber people. So we go, all of my devices have, you know, EDR and VPNs, and they use all these different things.
Right.
But that's not the case for your marketing person in a company or your HR. Their home devices, they don't use that stuff.
I would agree with that. Yeah, they don't use VPN definitely.
If I were to re-ask, if I was going to re-ask that same question, how has COVID changed, you know, from your perspective as the global CIO or CISO of a large organization? So take the end user out of it, I mean, which is a huge component. But when you think about some of the challenges that you face on your level and that your other regional CISOs and directors of infrastructure and director of security space, what are some of those challenges that exist now that didn't exist prior to COVID?
So when you look at a hybrid infrastructure and architecture, the challenge of having someone go into an office building wasn't a challenge until COVID happened. So a lot of landlords in a lot of office buildings shut down the building and wouldn't let anyone come in or out.
Right. Yep.
Right. And so if you've got to go in and do maintenance on one of your servers,
you're screwed. Yeah.
You're screwed. And it took a lot of phone calls and a lot of conversation and setting a process for someone to walk in to hit a reset, which then brought up the conversation from the executive leadership of, well, how do we make sure that if this goes on for longer than, 15 days or a month or two, that we don't have to go through with this every time? And, that brought up the cloud migration and cloud conversation, because now you're looking at on-prem solutions and you're going, how do I take this on-prem to the cloud? And I love some of the, conversations where people go, well, it's pretty easy. Just send your servers to a data center somewhere and you're done. And you're like,
no,
not how that works.
Yeah.
Like, that's nice if that was the case. But this isn't pizza. You can't just order it in.
That actually brings up a good question. So, in your case, and again, if you can share without naming names, has COVID increased your adoption of a cloud-based strategy versus what you had historically as a more was on-prem, and it's a completely...
So we were about 20% on-prem, 80% cloud.
Okay.
But we had to switch. We had to take the other 20% to the cloud. Okay. And that involved, and we had the other 20%. I think a lot of people know that you leave some stuff on-prem because it's strategic. It's kind of, your either Achilles heels. It's stuff where you want to have a little bit more oversight or more physical control. And we had to change that, and we had to kind of change our thought process around it. And it required a lot of thinking and a lot of looking at it from a perspective of how do we move this stuff to the cloud in a environment where we feel comfortable from not just security but also operational integrity, that this is still going to operate at the same way we've built it, on prem. And those conversations, in our organization, I'd like to, we have all the stakeholders at every single one of those conversations, from engineering and architecture and security, and it's a very thorough process of doing something like this, where you can't just say, all right, move that to the cloud, let's go. It's, well, how do we move it to the cloud? What are the stages? What needs to go? What isn't going to be there because we're transitioning to the cloud from a DevOps perspective and an AppSec perspective. There's things that you're using in the cloud, and tools and tools and cloud items, cloud services that you're using that don't exist in on-prem solutions. They just don't. They're non-existent. But then you got to pick the cloud provider you want to work with, and you got to understand their vulnerabilities. I think one of the challenges that most people have a hard time really wrapping their heads around from an organizational perspective, if we look at this from a pure business standpoint, is how do you enhance security in the cloud, which is in a lot of cases, an issue of maturity and knowledge. And with cloud being so new, it's a problem.
Well, that's actually was going to be my last follow-on question, and that was, how much when you were getting together as executive teams, did risk come up? The likelihood of risk if you move versus its magnitude if you didn't.
So there wasn't an issue of, we view risk as being a part of doing business, right? And so we have a risk appetite, but for us strategically, it's business continuity. So we know that if we can't get to our servers ever again because of whatever reason, right? This time it was COVID. Tomorrow it could be a snowstorm, right? The next day it could be tornadoes. It can be hurricanes. It can be 5 terrorist attacks. It can be a military coup. You name it.
Yeah.
A lot of...
or you could just get booted off of Amazon.
That too.
Not saying that could happen. I mean, but in the realm of a risk register, that...
I mean, I'll tell you that COVID changed a lot of our thinking with cloud providers, and then the aftermath of January 6th did as well.
Yeah.
So
I would hope so. Right? I was going to ask you about that.
So that did as well. But from our end, Kevin, to kind of look at it from a risk perspective, we looked at it from a business operation, and then we said, what's the risk? We know business has to run a specific way. Now, in order to do business this way, this is what we're going to have to do. Now, is that risk any different than the existing risk that's in place with the way we operate today? There's no zero risk, like I know people talk zero trust, but there's no such thing as zero risk. Although I want to write a book that says zero risk, and then the whole book would be blank pages and see there's no such thing as zero risk. There's no such thing as zero trust. Signed. Bye. But
although the zero trust crowd category is doing awesome, their stocks are doing amazingly well in this environment. But I'm digressing we can get to that
debate too if you'd like. We looked at it from an operational perspective, and so if the risk outweighed business operations in a place where it was significant for a long period of time, where the risk became unacceptable, we had to find other ways to get more creative in how we're going to make that transition. There was no such option for us as we're not going to do it. I think the option was, how do we do it in a way where business continuity is maintained and revenue is still streamlined? How do we not increase our overhead costs by doing this? Meaning, this investment's got to be able to repay itself. And then how do we integrate all the different aspects of the business and primarily security into this so that we as a business can continue to operate. Because, unfortunately, customers who pay you for something aren't going to sit around and be like, hey, sure, take 3 months. It's okay.
Right. No.
That's just not a reality.
One of the things at Dark Rhino, a lot of our customers are in small, medium businesses, the sub 2,000 employee market space, if you will, James. And what we encounter quite a bit in that segment is that companies struggle with the definition of risk. They just understanding it. As a prime example, when you ask folks, what do you need to guard the most? What do you want to protect the most? A lot of times they don't have a very concise answer. So do you have any suggestions for those folks? Is there a framework, a methodology, an approach, something that you would suggest that they adopt that would further their maturity in that arena?
So I think risk is a very interesting concept for small businesses and I think mid-sized companies, because when you operate in an environment like today where everything is SaaS, right? And a lot of these businesses operate on a multi-SaaS. That's why Okta is just right. Okta.
Yep.
Okta wouldn't be around if it wasn't for all the SaaS products that are out there that different, departments within a business use all these different SaaS-based solutions, right? And you don't want to have someone have, 17 different logins and passwords. That's just unhygienic. In comes Okta, right? Mm-hmm. So, when you talk about risk, it's hard for those companies to identify that as a risk, because as far as they're concerned, we're diversified, right? And you put yourself in the head of a small business owner, and I have a lot of friends that own small businesses that are, whether it be marketing firms or accountants or lawyers. And so whenever they talk to me about security, they go, who's going to want to hack me, man? I'm on Office 365 and I use QuickBooks, and that's, and I use Word, and I use the courthouse system, and it's the courthouse. No one is
James, but you get that same opinion, even if the company has 500 or 600.
Well, yeah. And some of my friends do have those kinds of businesses, and I look at them and I go, I get it. I understand that. But I think the one thing you have to pay attention to is it's not really you they want. It's your customers that they want. Mm-hmm. So if you value and you want to keep your customers going, what's the risk if you were shut down for 4 days to your customers and to your business?
Right.
Now, I hate to use FUD, so we go about this and I go, what's your hour worth? Mm-hmm. $1,000. Okay, wonderful. So you charge $1,000 an hour. You're a really high-priced, very good lawyers. I have plenty of lawyer friends. So, these guys, they all of a sudden tripled their rates. Who know?
Yeah, right? It's crazy.
Yeah. So either way, I go, so $1,000 an hour. So you work how many hours a day? Let's say you work 10 hours a day. So you make 10 grand a day. Fairly acceptable. Okay.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. You have paralegals. You charge for them $150, $200 an hour. So what does your business stand to make every day? Now, if your business shut down for a full day because of a cyber incident, how far back does that set you? Now, if you made this investment in security, that would just be basic blocking and tackling. We'll take the CIS top 20. Let's look at the top 7 or 8 of them, and let's just put those controls in place.
Well, you know what, James? Yeah. You may be the exception, but when, it said Kevin at McKinsey.com, people returned my phone call. When it says Kevin or Manoj at Dark Rhino Security, it was like, who? And so I guess my question is to you at a person at your level, as a global CIO level, we have found that, and this is a broad brush statement, that it's very hard not only to get to you, but when you get to an individual like yourself, is to get you to think outside of your own paradigm. So my question to you is, how do CIOs and CISOs in your role, the global organization, how do you look for companies that are innovative, creative, or doing things that are outside the box that actually can make a difference during these difficult times that we're facing right now?
So are you talking from a technology perspective or a knowledge perspective?
Knowledge. Let's start with knowledge.
So from knowledge, it's a little bit more challenging. So we, from a global perspective, have a list of authorized vendors that can come in from a consulting perspective. And like you said, if it was a McKinsey or a PwC or any of those big names, they're on the list. When you talk about the smaller organizations, it's a bit more of a challenge. The way we leverage some of that power, though, is if we find a small company that we like to do business with, we'll go to the big name and say, we don't want to work with any of your people. We want to work with these people. So you go do what you got to do with them and engage them to engage us.
Okay.
And unfortunately, you know, it's the politics of working in big corporations, right? When I hire a company that's unknown, the risk of a project failure and the risk on my reputation and the internal politics is greater. And it's unfortunate. I wish that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
But it's the absolute truth. And so you kind of have to go about it politically. And it's a way of how, you know, some people, you know, lawyers do this all the time. And I hate to go back into lawyers, but I have lawyer friends that's all they do. Like, you know, they're very, very smart. But let's say they're not in the bar in a specific state, but they're really smart. They understand the law. So, you know, and someone says, I want to hire you to represent me in this case. He goes, well, I can't argue in front of the judge, but go engage a lawyer in your state that's, you know, in the bar, have him engage me.
Right.
And then I can consult on the case.
But typically, do you find that the PwCs and Deloittes and the Accentures and they just don't want to partner with smaller firms because they don't want to give up revenue?
Then we don't give them the revenue. Then that budget isn't going to them, right? At that point, they're like, well, we can do it. We know how to do this. And I'm like, you're a 23-year-old or 24-year-old, newly out of college, $60,000 a year Excel carrying person does not understand how to solve this. This requires seasoned people, not people that are, you know, the one thing about big firms that a lot of companies have started to understand, including our own, is they bring the most impressive name to the meetings to get the contract, and then you never see that person again.
Correct.
Never, ever.
Yeah.
Like you see him only when him only when you're ready to cancel the contract.
Or when you need to spend
those people are really expensive, James, as you know. And getting him tied up on one project is very expensive.
But at the same time, if you're going to bring someone in a big name like that, right, have the downstream support of smart people around that person. Most of the time, they don't do that. And we hold them accountable. So, you know, on my end, I don't work with big consulting firms with, you know, talent unless I see the full CV of every talent. I don't care who you are.
Well, you're an exception.
You really are. Truly, you are.
You're an exception.
Yeah. I'm a customer. I'm paying money. I'm not going to pay you any money for people that I can go and get through a recruiting firm for half the price. I'm just not going to do it because you're a big name firm. I want people who are going to really contribute to our team. And so if you don't have them, we're not interested.
So let's switch direction just for a second here. And let me ask you this. Do you think that now companies understand much better that cybersecurity is a business problem and not necessarily an IT problem?
It took COVID to do that, but look, I'm spoiled. I work in an organization where security has always been top of mind, right? So,
well, then you're an exception.
So, you know, I keep hearing that on the show, but I'm not. I think there's a lot of Fortune 500 companies that have been victims of breaches where security for a long time has been part of business, and because of what they went through, because of the incidents they went through, and the PTSD they have thereafter, it carries among the boards, and most boards are, you know, a board member that serves in one company probably serves in 4 or 5 others, and that pain goes across and it spreads. And so you tend to see that on bigger companies, cyber's been that way. I think in the mid-size market, what cyber used to be an IT problem has now become a business problem. I think you see that now more with mid-sized companies. So not the Fortune 500s, but the mid-sized companies, the third-party supply chain companies have become more aware that cyber needs to be a business part. And I think some of them, by hiring smart CISOs, by the way, understand also how to monetize it. Because now the path of monetizing cyber within your infrastructure is out there. So monetize it.
You know what? You're the first CISO. So I'm actually glad you brought this up, because I bring this up with clients all the time. But you're the first CISO we've had on the show that's actually brought that up, that there is a pathway to monetize cyber, and you're absolutely spot on with that.
Yeah, if you're not monetizing, if you're as a CISO are not selling cyber to your sales team to sell to their customers, I don't want to say you're failing at your job, but you're missing an opportunity to enhance your budget, increase your visibility across the organization, and increase your stature among the C-suite. So, you know, a very funny thing I saw today from I forgot who it was. I think it was the guy over at Tax Cyber. I forgot his name. The former CISO over at AT&T. But he had something where it was the CISO sitting at the kids table, and it was the CEO coming and saying, "Hey, time for you to get out the kids table. Come join the big boy table."
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to wait for the CEO to invite you to that table. You can earn your spot at that table by simply understanding how to monetize cyber within the sales and marketing team. So like when we do internal phishing tests, I do them with our marketing team. I do actual phishing tests with our marketing team. They design the campaigns, they build the email, they give me the HTML, they do all of it from a marketing perspective, so it looks as close as possible to something that's really good.
That's wonderful. Go ahead, Manoj.
No, I was going to say that's fantastic. That's a great idea, by the way.
It really is.
Use your own marketing team to design the darn thing.
And hopefully they're not the ones that are
clicking. Who's going to know your company better? Yeah. And who's going to know the personalities of the people that are likely to click it? I mean, that's a real test.
It is. Because when I do the test, or when you do the test, we do it as cyber guys.
Right.
Right?
We look at the header and everything else.
Right. They do it from a perspective to where they understand the psychology of the user. And the psychology of the user is everything in an awareness test. And by the way, I don't measure my awareness tests by people who click on it. I don't give a shit if you click, right? You're supposed to click. But I care. My percentage is how many people who clicked reported it. That's my success rate.
Oh, interesting. And so how do you educate the people that click but don't report?
So I don't. So I'm a big fan of Know Before. All right, and I'll just say that outright. I really love what Know Before does, and we use them a lot, and we've customized the trainings. So we don't do the 10-minute standard training. You clicked, you failed, go do a 10-minute training and complete it. We break down data. So we look at who clicked and what they click on and what was the campaign that we did, right? And we don't do campaign for the entire company. Our campaigns are based on departments. They're based on roles. They're based on access to, if I get your credentials and you're a system admin, we're probably going to have a harsher conversation than if you're a call center employee with very limited access to data. It's just as bad, but it's not as bad as a system admin. So there's that aspect of it. So we look at we look at that data, we look at those numbers, we break it down, and then we go in and we customize the training for the people who didn't report it. So we go, what is it about this email that you clicked on it, you did what you did, and didn't make you seem fishy? Like didn't make it seem like it was an issue. And we don't want to shame them. So I don't believe in the shaming aspect of it. I've been in a lot of conversation with my peers where we're in roundtables and they go, if you fail it third time, we could fire you. And I'm like, well, that's counterproductive.
Yeah.
That's very counterproductive.
Right? I don't want anyone to lose their job because they failed a phishing test. Like, I don't want them, even if they do it 10 times, I don't want them to fail. Like, I don't want them fired. Right? I realize they're a risk, but then we mitigate that risk. Maybe they don't get emails with links anymore. I don't know. Maybe they don't get attachments anymore. Maybe we'll deploy a tool that takes every attachment they get, turns it into a JPEG. That's it.
Yeah.
You get a JPEG.
no danger there.
No danger, no danger in you taking a document and us making it a JPEG, and then, go into Word and do it that way. Or no one is allowed to send you documents. It's only got to be done through our OneDrive or, or Teams or whatever it is, right? Like, there are creative solutions to dealing with the human aspect of it, but it takes a little bit of spending time with those people and getting outside of our own echo chamber of security.
Makes sense.
That makes sense. So do you think it would be better if the CISO was moved out from under the CIO's role and had their own function, independent of IT?
So I'm a fan of the office of the CISO. It's in fact part of my book. I have 3 chapters in my book that advocate for the office of the CISO. And what I advocate for is that the office of the CISO today has to cover beyond IT. You have legal and compliance, right?
Yes.
That have to fall under the office of the CISO. I remember about a half a year ago, I was offered a position somewhere else, and I won't say, and they show me the organizational chart and they go, 60% of the time you go to this guy and 40% of the time you report to this guy. And I was like, and 100% of the time I go crazy. So no, thank you. Right. That's like not a very healthy structure for your CISO. And that's maybe why you're having a hard time filling this role. Right. A CISO should be an independent office, no different than how the COO is or the CEO is. I had a post on LinkedIn a few weeks ago where I think over 100,000 people saw it, but it was a post where I said the role of the CISO is the most diverse role beyond the role of a CEO in a company, because you have to know so much about every single aspect of the business in order to really understand how to do security, right? It's not just about securing the endpoint or the firewall or the network. You have to understand every function of the business.
Do you feel that many of your peers have that knowledge?
It's getting there.
It's getting there.
It's getting there.
Better.
It's getting better. We as a community are doing better. There's a lot of great stuff out there. CISOs are paying more attention to that. Most CISOs used to go and get more certs. Now they're getting business MBAs. That's a thing. So that's really important because they're going out and they're getting their higher education, not in cyber and not in compliance business and not in legal. They're getting now their MBAs in business. So now they're starting to understand the role of business. I mean, in my book, I won't say how long, but I predict that we'll see CISOs become the ideal candidates for CEOs within a period of time. Because boards are going to start to realize that, the role of a CEO usually used to come CFO or COO. That's kind of your path, is you're either in finance or operations and you become a CEO, unless you're a Steve Jobs or a Tim Cook or, a founder of a big company. But if you look at the legacy organizations like the AT&Ts or the Verizons or even the Comcast, if you look at their CEOs' backgrounds, those were all money guys. They're all Wall Street balance sheet guys. They're not really, anything else. And you're going to see, when big companies like Verizon and AT&T and Comcast opened their own cybersecurity divisions to become vendors, understand that CISOs are the next CEOs in those organizations.
Okay. So you talk.
Let's see. The future will tell. That's an interesting point of view. I can see where you're coming from. Let's see if that changes. That would be interesting. That's interesting.
It's already happened. It just happened.
Where?
Intel acquired VMware, and they took the CEO of VMware and made him the CEO of Intel. And the CEO of VMware is a security background, IT background kind of guy. He's not a business guy.
It's interesting.
He learned business.
Well,
and now he's the CEO of Intel.
Well, he eventually became okay.
So James, go ahead, Manoj. Go ahead.
No, I was going to. I'm just watching the clock here because we have him for an hour. Not
we have him for 9 more minutes.
We're always respectful of people's times. That's I hate destroying people's times going over. But I do want to talk about China.
Let's do that.
Yeah, I really do want to get to that. The Chinese cybersecurity threat. And maybe I'm picking on China, but I would say it is. There's a lot of countries that have no extradite agreements with the United States, and people who are hungry, to say the least. And cyber is a great way to make a good living. Actually, you make a pretty good living doing it. So, but let's go back to China. What do you think on the Chinese threat to the United States at a cybersecurity level? Is that one of the bigger threats as from a national security perspective?
China is our biggest national security threat, period, on all levels: economical, military, especially cyber. And economical and military, and to use cyber to gain an edge in both fields.
Okay. I agree.
So I think there's a lot we can agree with. And so here's what I'll tell you what I see about China. One, we have to, I said, I'll explain this kind of, let me go back. Let me explain this in a different way. The reason China's our biggest adversary, and the reason some of our adversaries that you mentioned, other countries, not just to pick on China, but if you look at Russia or Iran or North Korea, the reason they have a lot of success in cyber, in their cyber espionage and cyber attacks and so forth, is because they have identical leadership for 20 some odd years. This morning I was doing a show, we're talking about it on LinkedIn, and I said Putin's been around since 1999. It's now 2021. It's 22 years. I don't have socks that are 22 years old.
Yeah.
They have the same guy in power for 22 years, right? You don't have a card. You've switched 7 cars by then. Some people switched 7 cars in that time period. This guy's been around for that long. In China, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, has been running the country for over, 60 years now? Same leadership.
Well over that.
Same leadership, same direction. The names at the head may change, but the general purpose, direction, and goals are all the same. And so it's easy for them to be very successful in cyber because they have one leadership. It's steady leadership. In the Western nations, and specifically I'm going to go to the US, cybersecurity has become a bipartisan political issue. And it shouldn't be. It should be a universal national issue that shouldn't be partisan. It should be bipartisan. We should all agree that cybersecurity is really important, that we should invest a ton of money on it, that we should empower DoD, DHS, DOE, Department of Energy. That's very, very important. Because people always talk DOD, DHS, NSA, CIA, all that. But I'm like, Department of Energy, Department of Energy, Department of Energy. Don't forget those guys. You need them. Treasury, DOJ. And you need to empower them all with and the government needs to find a way to do this where they are no longer viewed as political players, but rather partners to our joint mission of cybersecurity. And there needs to be some bills and some policy that's put in place to defend organizations from nation state cyber attacks. Meaning, if you're, people are talking about a class action against SolarWinds, right? And we saw that with Equifax.
Yes.
Here's my challenge with that. Did anyone, and I don't mean to compare the two, so I won't do this. I was going to go in a direction, but
no, SolarWinds, there's no technology that would have stopped that.
No, there wasn't. They're a victim of a nation state crime. So if we view it as a terror attack, would you sue the victim? Would you sue Pizza Hut if someone blew up in a Pizza Hut?
Absolutely not.
No, but I'm sure that the law permits you to do
the
so.
law does permit you to do so, but that's a failure of the law.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, you can sue them, and chances are that the lawsuit's going to get dismissed, but not at the cost of the business. Right?
Would agree.
The fact that Equifax had a class action lawsuit and settled it was a very dangerous precedent. Extremely dangerous. It's now set the place where anyone can class action lawsuit any company on a nation state attack. And so if we classify cyber attacks as nation state cyber attacks that can be verified and confirmed by, let's say, CISO as an independent body, right? Or the FBI, and we go, we deem this cyber attack to be nation state. And there's a law that says if it's a nation state attack, there's no repercussions. There's no legal repercussions that the victims of the victim can take against that company.
I would agree.
That then you would have a type of business environment where those corporations would now trust the government and do that. I'll give you a prime example in Equifax. I have friends here in Atlanta who were the FBI in the FBI field office who went to Equifax to, help. And they couldn't speak to anyone from Equifax. They spoke to King and Spalding. That's a law firm. They were speaking to lawyers. They were asking questions and they were getting answers from lawyers.
Yeah, protecting their assets.
I think that if such a policy is to go out, there needs to be a joint policy there that needs to go at the consumer level. Like right now, if your identity was part of the Equifax, you're kind of screwed, man. I mean,
we've all been screwed.
And your people, and people's, the one thing we work on a lot of things are antiquated at this point in time. They just haven't kept up with the technology, like our social security numbers. Everybody wants that. Everybody, there's so many places that they should not be using those, but they do as a central identifier. If that is compromised, there should be some protection then for you as a citizen to make sure that can't be reused again. And
one thing
doesn't exist.
One thing I said after Equifax is go to the DMV and change your driver's license number and change the issue date of your driver's license. So if your identity was stolen and the ID that was used was pre-Equifax, you have a chance of erasing that debt, that fraud that happened under your name from your credit report so it doesn't impact you.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Well, in a lot of states. So in Pennsylvania, you get one shot at changing your driver's license. And then after that, they're going to be like, if you're consistently changing your driver's license, that's not going to fly. No. Do you have a police report?
Yeah, I would go file a police report every time. My identity was stolen. Here's the data breach notification. According to them, at this date, my identity was stolen. They had this driver's license number, which creates a severe threat to my identity. I'd go file a police report. Today, you can do that online in most police stations, by the way, because it's a victimless crime where they come to your house, they give you a police report, they give you a number, and then you go to the DMV and you give them the police report number. I would do it, absolutely. You're the government. I'm not working for you. You work for me. And it's your job to protect my identity. We as people have forgotten that we, the people, have rights. And the government needs the government needs to protect us as citizens, not their lazy back ends in doing a job.
and that, my friend, is exactly the point. I think policies that are going to be pushed out in this arena can't be done just to cover the Equifaxes of the world. They must also cover the end citizenry that's impacted by it in some way, shape, or form. It can't be that individual consumers left to fend for themselves, because Equifax, see, I don't have a choice who uses. I have no choice with Experian or Equifax when I go apply for a loan. I'm stuck with it, and that's, to a degree, that's BS. I have no way to, and I have no control over that. But if they lose my data, then they're like, well, dude, you're on your own. And that doesn't work.
Well, James, I want to, as Manoj said, we this hour passed very quickly.
Oh, it's way too quick. I mean, this is a very good
really
discussion.
Getting into the
I'd
meat
love
of
to.
everything.
We can go 5 more minutes. I just pushed my next call by 5, so we've got 5 more.
Okay.
So I have a question. So it goes managed detection and response. When you look at firms like CrowdStrike or Carbon Black, are those guys doing it right, or are there other firms out there doing it differently, or how does a big firm like you, if an event turns into an incident, how does that work? I mean, what does a big firm like you guys do? Is it, or should that change the way that people are looking at MDR?
So I'll kind of go about this a little differently. I think that no matter what vendor you use, it's about the implementation and integration of their technology at any given moment that does this. So, I was doing a LinkedIn Live a few weeks ago, and someone, sorry, I was on a call with another CISO, and they're more hands-on, right? They have a smaller team than I do. And so they're asking me, we're looking at SIM solutions for our SOC. What SIM do you use in your SOC? And I looked at them and I was just like,
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, you raise your eyebrows, Manoj. Yeah, that's what some people looked at me like, how do you not know? And I was like, I don't have time to get into that. I don't think people understand how difficult and time consuming the role of a CISO is beyond tools. And I think that's one thing, like I always tell vendors, they go, James, it takes you 3 months to answer my email. I go, because you're like the last thing I'm thinking about right now is tools.
Right. And we wrote a paper years ago, rules before tools, and that was done 15 years ago, that, we wanted to make sure that we put policy and process in place before we sell or, try to inundate people with products. It just doesn't work. So, but that was an interesting comment. It was a very interesting comment. Thank you.
I mean, I'm all for optimizing tools, right? So before we buy any tool, our VPs get together and they go, this is the problem we're trying to solve. Now we look at our tool checklist of all the tools we have.
So there's one other thing I want to ask, and I apologize, and that's why Manoj never lets me on these things.
You got 30 seconds,
You
Kevin.
made an interesting comment.
I want to give James a chance to plug himself, too.
You said vendors and not partners. I'm sure that wasn't a deliberate choice, or you chose that word deliberately. Why not partners?
Because I have only very few partners and a lot of vendors.
Okay.
So I'd love to have more partners.
Yeah.
But I have more vendors than I do partners, and I treat my vendors like vendors, and I treat my partners exactly like partners.
Yeah.
So when you talked about a situation where what happens if something goes on, the first phone call goes to my partners.
Yeah.
Not to the vendors.
Great. Excellent. So it does exist in large corporations, partnerships versus vendors.
I don't want a vendor.
Good.
I need a partner in security. Security is about partnerships. It's not about vendors.
Good.
I'm not Salesforce.
Yeah.
Right?
All right. James, Manoj.
So, James, we're coming up on the hour. Are you going to be doing any events, shows, books, anything coming out that you want us to put in the show notes?
So I have several podcasts that people can check out, including my CISO Talk podcast, where I speak to other CISOs. It's no sales, kind of, a conversation around leadership and cyber and stuff that we like to do on our off time, like books we read and movies we watch and music we listen to. It's a fun podcast called CISO Talk. I am doing a bunch of events, man, way too many to list, but I am on LinkedIn every day at 9 a.m. live. I do a practitioner brief every day for 10 minutes at 9 a.m. On my page, where I talk about the stories in the news, but from a risk, impact, and mitigation perspective. So beyond the headline, here's a vulnerability. Great. I understand there's this vulnerability, but what's the risk of it? What's the impact? And what's going to be the mitigation? And I do that Monday through Thursdays at 9 a.m.
I like that.
Very good. We'll put the link in the show notes.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much
for having me on.
It was an honor. Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much. This was wonderful, James. Really appreciate it. Hope you come back sometime.
We'll have another bourbon.
Yes, we will. Maybe in person next time, though.
I would love that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Great. Thank you.
Cheers,
take
guys.
Care, James.
Take care. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
guys.